The wildest ever swing in crude oil markets dragged US benchmark WTI crude into negative territory in Monday's trade. Yesterday was a historic day for global oil markets, witnessing a futures contract for the West Texas crude nosediving over 300%. Now, while oil markets are bouncing back today, but we are witnessing historic lows in general due to the poor demand. The price on the futures contract for the West Texas crude that is due for expiry today fell into negative territory and hit minus $37.63 a barrel. Negative prices are the latest indication of the depth of the crisis that is hitting the oil sector as of now. The benchmark collapsed to unprecedented lows as traders tried to rid themselves of unwanted crude amid a devastating supply glut, where crude oil traders prematurely dumped May contracts a day ahead of the expiry. The extreme plunge shows how oversupplied the US oil market is, with industrial and economic activity grinding to a halt as governments around the globe have extended shutdowns. The decline reflects the logistical limits of the physical oil market. There literally isn't anywhere to put all the oil as of now, so it is being pumped into storage tanks. The problem is those storage tanks are now starting to fill up, so no one wants any new oil. And now for more details and insights into the oil markets, I'm joined by two guests. Jagriti Dave joins us from Washington, D.C. and Dr. James Brown, a professor who is also an international affairs expert, is also joining me. Professor, I'll request you to stay with us while I ask Jagriti a few questions. Jagriti, thank you for joining us. Now, it seems that the American oil industry is facing a doomsday scenario with oil demand slipping to unprecedented lows. We know that the Trump administration wants to reopen the economy. So how do we see this damage to the oil industry being tackled?
Well, the president was asked this at the daily task force briefing, and he said that he wants to lease out storage space that they have in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to companies that are experiencing issues with storage commercially. He said that he was looking to purchase 75 million barrels of crude as well to sort of top up those supplies. But really, as you were saying there, it shows the depth of the crisis globally due to the coronavirus, that oil reserves have been, that the oil prices have been hit like this, and the oversupply in the US oil market means that we have got to these historic lows. The president is obviously talking about opening up the economy, and you're seeing signs of some states gradually lifting those restrictions. So there's clearly some hope that that demand that is was so low, because you essentially have travel that's been shut down, you have commercial activity that's closed down. So this dip in demand, there is a hope that by reopening the economy that will increase again and slowly bring prices to a more stable level.
Right. Now we're also hearing that many oil companies are now under too much debt in the US and may not be able to survive this downturn. So is there a plan in place to rescue them or provide any kind of relief?
Well, other than the details that the president outlined that I just mentioned, the strategic oil petroleum reserves and the leasing of storage to alleviate that storage problem that is driving down prices, clearly there are many sectors that the president and his administration need to support that have been hit by the pandemic, and so oil is clearly going to be one of them. So this is one measure that the president has talked about. But I think the reopening of the economy seems to be that key strategy that the administration hopes is going to solve a lot of their problems for a lot of industries. There's stimulus packages that the administration that has given to small businesses, for example, which has hit its own snags. That he's attempted to give money directly in cash deposits to individuals to support them. He's talked about stimulus for the airline industry, another huge industry that obviously relies closely tied to the oil industry with regards to the use of petroleum for travel. So these are all industries that are interconnected, that are a result, that are connected due to the pandemic. But obviously, as economies start to reopen, it's not certain that they're going to stay open. If there are resurgences in cases, health experts have said that, states in the United States may have to claw back any of those opening measures that they put in place. It's not clear the path forward is going to be straight reopening of the economy. There's probably going to be some movement forward, some movement back, movement forward, movement back as we go along.
Right. Jagriti, my final question to you before we go to Professor Brown, who is joining us from Tokyo. Now, there are plenty of state-wise protests in the US to remove these lockdowns, and President Trump seems to support them. So what is the current scenario in the US, and is the country ready to reopen its economy?
So there are polls out that suggest that many Americans are uncertain about the reopening of the economy. They are worried that it might be about the consequences of reopening too soon. Health experts have also expressed concerns about the reopening of the economy without widespread testing in place to ensure that employees can go back to work safely. It's something that business leaders have also expressed concerns about. On the other hand, you do see these protests from people who are against the stay-at-home orders in their states. People coming out flouting social distancing laws, protesting their rights to freedom, demanding to be able to do things like go and get their haircuts, reopening of businesses, saving of the economy. Some of them arguably are not convinced by the severity of the measures that they see are too extreme for the virus. Others are simply just concerned about their own livelihoods and about the economy. We've heard about the vast numbers of millions of unemployed people, 22 million in the last 4 weeks unemployed in the United States because of shutdown. So this has clearly the country has taken a huge hit, and people are clearly concerned about their livelihoods. The president is supporting these protesters. And, he tweeted over the weekend, particularly naming states like Michigan, Virginia, Liberate Michigan,
right.
Which has been asked, appears to contradict the orders of the states, which is to stay at home.
Right. All right, Jagriti, thank you so much for your inputs and for joining us. And now let's move over and get some insights from Professor James Brown, who is an Associate Professor of Political Science at the Temple University, and he's joining us from Tokyo. Good morning, Professor. Thanks for joining us. So tell us, oil prices are slumping to unprecedented lows in the face of this poor demand, and while we are seeing some recovery today, what lies ahead for global economies?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to make a specific point to do with the oil price, because there are really two separate things going on here. We have the underlying situation, which is a very weak demand due to the global pandemic, and adding to that also the price war until recently between Saudi Arabia and Russia. But then with the prices yesterday, we have a specific factor as well, which is the expiry of monthly contracts. We have to remember that the majority of oil traders have no intention of taking physical delivery of the oil. Their intention is to purchase it at a lower price and then sell it on.
Right.
But when it comes towards the end of the contract, these traders don't want to take physical delivery. They have to get rid of it, which is why you had this sort of fire sale of oil contracts taking place yesterday. So that means that we won't expect to see oil prices remaining negative. That's simply very unlikely to occur.
Right. Now, shifting focus to the US, several US oil companies may go bankrupt, and that's what experts are predicting. So what does the administration need to do to rescue these companies?
Well, it really comes down to a political choice here, because the Trump administration seems to have expressed very clear support for the oil companies and a real willingness to do almost whatever it takes to help them out. But that's controversial, because many would say, well, these are companies that do employ a lot of people, but they are also companies that produce a resource that, while necessary, is also very damaging for the environment. So there'll be quite a lot of political backlash if there's too much assistance for them. In the short term, the Trump administration can help by providing space within the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, as your other guest mentioned. There's also this talk about potentially helping out domestic companies by even applying sanctions on the import of oil from other countries, such as Saudi Arabia.
Right. My final question, it seems like we are all in this catch-22 situation. We know the poor oil demand is linked to the lockdowns, but the lockdowns are essential. So what needs to be done to save the oil economy in general?
Well, really, when it comes to the underlying demand, there is very little in the short term that can be done. This is dependent on the overall health of the economy. And until the economy is looking healthier, then oil demand will remain very, very weak. And really, it just comes down to the length of time that these shutdowns will remain in place. We've seen in Europe that some countries are now moving towards very slowly reducing some of the measures. But it remains to be seen whether this is really the beginning of the end of this situation, or whether it's going to go on for months. And if it does go on for months, the oil companies are going to be in huge amounts of trouble. But frankly, that's just an indication of the economic troubles for all sectors of the economy.
All right, Professor Brown, thank you so much for joining us and for all those insights into the oil markets.